Accounting and Finance Department, and today I'm going to be taking you through activity-based costing. How many of you have ever heard of activity-based costing? I'm sure for most of you it's not your first time hearing activity-based costing. So what are our specific learning objectives? So we should be able to describe the differences between activity-based and traditional costing systems. We also need to identify and explain each of the stages involved in designing ABC systems, and to apply an activity-based costing approach to costing information. So these are our specific learning objectives. So at the end of this lecture, you should be able to do all of the above. So now let's discuss what is activity-based costing. So activity-based costing is simply an extension of absorption costing. So for your absorption costing, I'll refer you back to the video lecture on inventory costing. So the lecture on inventory costing is a detailed explanation of absorption costing. So for absorption costing, just as a quick recap, there is no classification of manufacturing cost or overheads between fixed and variable. So my cost of sales contains or consists of all manufacturing overheads, whether they are fixed or variable. To get my gross profit, which I subtract my selling and administration cost to get my net profit. So that's a recap of your absorption costing. So now, since it is an extension of our absorption costing, it means some elements within activity-based costing are similar, but they are different somehow. So ABC is simply a different absorption costing method for allocation of fixed manufacturing overheads to products. So using your traditional method, for me to allocate my fixed manufacturing overheads, I had to calculate what we called an overhead absorption rate. So my overhead absorption rate was dependent on different volume-related measures. So for calculating my overhead absorption rate, I would calculate maybe based on number of units, which is my total fixed manufacturing overheads divided by the number of units, or it could be total fixed manufacturing overheads divided by the total machine hours or labor hours, to get what I would call the rate or the absorption rate, which could be $1 per unit, $5 per machine hour, or $5 per labor hour. But using activity-based costing, I'm now allocating the fixed manufacturing overheads based on the activity. So the only difference between ABC and traditional method is ABC makes use of different activities as its allocation base, whereas the traditional methods make use of volume-related bases, as I just explained. So now let's move on. Why would one want to use activity-based costing? Was there a major difference or a major inconsistency with traditional costing method that would make an organization want to use ABC? So an organization can decide on how to price this product, or maybe to continue or discontinue with production of a certain product. So back then, information processing costs were high, and it was therefore difficult to justify more sophisticated overhead allocation methods. But now, as we are moving forward, we are now want to refer more to activity-based costing. Why? Because it leads to accurate pricing of products. So The pricing of a product is one of the decisions that an entity or management should make. So back then, overhead costs were relatively small, and so since they were smaller, the impact of their distortion to the product cost was minimal. But today, as you are now seeing, we are moving to a more technologically advanced manufacturing environment, which means what? It now means your manufacturing overheads, your fixed manufacturing overheads, now consume a larger or a substantial amount of the total cost of what? Of your product. So with this in mind, I would need to ensure that I have correctly priced my product. Because as we are depending with the nature of your industry, if your consumers or your customers are price sensitive, if you incorrectly price your product, demand is likely to fall. But if your customers are price insensitive, whether you increase your price or you don't increase your price, your demand will likely remain the same. So with this in mind, I would need to accurately price my product, which brings me to the next one. If I allocate correctly or accurately my price, I can be able to analyze profitability for allocation of resources. Since I have priced my product, I can be able to calculate my profit. So it's my sales less my total production cost. I get my profit. From my profit, if I offer different products, for example, product X, product Y, and product Z, I can be able to establish the profits for each of those products. If I establish the profits of each of those products using ABC, I can be able to say I have accurately calculated my profit. So profit from product X is $, from product Y, $50, from product Z, $2. So based on those profitabilities, I can analyze the profits for allocation of resources. So in this typical example, I would allocate more resources to production of product Z. Why? It's giving me a higher profit than the other two products. I would also need to use activity-based costing for costing of cost objects separate from products. So on this one, we are now saying it is also useful for costing of cost objects separate from projects. So when ABC is applied, it is applied to support activities. Cost of diverse cost objects, such as a whole product line, or a production plant, or a customer group, can be computed. This is important for it analyzes the profitability for each of the diverse cost objects in supporting management's decision regarding allocation of what? Of resources. So why am I hammering on pricing of products, on profitability? If I linking this with your strategy, remember part of an organization's objective is to survive, is for growth, and for profit maximization. So for a product, for an organization to maximize its profit, it should have the minimum or minimal costs so that it achieves this objective. Now moving on, how do we implement this activity-based costing in steps? So in determining an appropriate basis of allocation, especially in a discussion type question, there is need to understand the scenario and apply your mind. So each and every company is different and the context is different in each and every setting. So when you are implementing ABC, you need to identify the activity. So in activity identification, that's where I establish which activity is contributing to my total manufacturing overhead cost. So if I'm given a pool of total manufacturing overheads of 1 million, how did I come up with the 1 million? I added up ordering costs plus packaging costs plus setting up costs to have my total fixed manufacturing overheads. So the activity is the step or what I did in the production process to come up with product Z. So if in coming up with product Z, I had to set up. So setting up is an example of an activity. Ordering is an example of an activity. From there, I need to analyze the product. Why do I need to analyze the product? To analyze the activity. In activity analysis, I'm now taking a closer look at how do I order, how do I set up. By setting up, do I mean I take component A plus component B and I need a technician and I need so on? Or if for ordering, it means I need an order book, I need this, I need that. That's an activity analysis. If I analyze the activity better, I can be able to discover or to justify which cost driver or which allocation base is more appropriate. So for example, in ordering, I can now be able to say what drives my ordering cost is the number of orders. So after I have established my cost driver, I now need to assign costs to the cost driver using the cost driver. So I've identified my activity, I've analyzed it, I now have my allocation basis, which is my cost driver. I need to assign costs based on the cost driver, which leads me to the calculation of activity rates. So if in calculating the activity rate, I need the number or the total, the activity ordering, the cost driver, number of orders. So I need the total number of orders and the total cost for ordering. So my total cost for ordering divided by the number of orders, I get the activity rate, which can be $1 per order, which is an example of an activity rate. From there onwards, I can assign costs to cost objects. Quite simple. So the approach to activity-based costing is there is need to separate fixed costs from variable costs and use only fixed costs. Remember the difference between traditional absorption costing and variable costing. And activity costing is the treatment of fixed overheads. So if I distinguish my fixed overheads, I split the cost into many activities, identify cost for each activity, and I determine and justify a cost driver for each activity. My justification for a cost driver comes from my activity analysis. From there, I can be able to trace the cost to products based on the product's demand for each activity. Now let's discuss, in a typical exam setting, how do you attempt an ABC question? So what information should you look for? So in every question, there are different what? Every question is different. Because like I mentioned, the context is different and the company being evaluated or being analyzed is also different. So your step number one is in an ABC calculation question, often asks a student to compare an ABC system with an existing method of costing products. So I currently have a method of how I cost my products. So I now need to compare ABC with my existing costing of products. Which is the existing costing of method of costing? My existing method could be, for example, traditional or absorption costing, or direct or variable costing. So you need to have ascertained the existing method of costing, as this will be your first calculation. So I now need to calculate under variable costing, what is my total production cost? Under absorption costing, if you are using absorption, what is my total production cost? Now I also need to calculate what? Total production costs using ABC, which brings me to my next step. So using my ABC, I identify the activities, the cost drivers, I calculate the activity rate, and I assign cost to the cost objects to obtain my total production cost. From there onwards, I can be able to compare. I compare the cost the cost under variable costing, under absorption costing, and under activity-based costing. And by comparing, it means I can be able to critically evaluate if I'm to implement an ABC costing system, what is the impact from my current existing method moving to ABC. You can establish that maybe your profitability can increase, or maybe you can decide to discontinue a certain product which you thought was profitable. But now using activity-based costing, you now establish that it was the product which I was absorbing, or it is the most activities which are driving more costs. Or maybe the decision to discontinue or close a division might be changed if we implement ABC, an ABC approach. So this is how you can attempt an ABC question. You can be asked to compare an existing system with ABC. You can be asked to evaluate or to consider the impact or the effect if we introduce an activity-based system. So that's a roundup of your activity-based costing. Remember, the major difference between all the costing methods, that is your variable costing, absorption costing, and ABC costing, lies in the treatment of fixed costs. So under your variable cost, you should know how you allocate or you treat your fixed cost. Under your absorption, I normally use my overhead absorption rate. But now under activity-based, I allocate my fixed overheads using the cost driver. Activity plus cost driver to establish the cost per activity using the cost driver, which I allocate to the product or to the what? Cost objects based on their usage of the activity. So for any follow-up questions on activity-based costing, still after this lecture you're not yet sure, please feel free to contact the following MAF department members. That's myself, Mutsawash at CAA, Elliot at CAA, Tapiwa at CAA, or alternatively, feel free to use our departmental email address, that is manfin@caa.ac.zw. So thank you so much for going through this lecture. See you next time.